So, for this case study, we took a look into a situation that arose between two students that we had various relationships with. So, I'll go ahead and just jump right in as far as the case study goes. So, student with a history of discipline, James, he's been in and out of juvenile detention, as the case had said, was seen giving another student, David, something to hold. When it was seen, it appeared that it was drugs that they saw on camera. And so, something that goes into the background of this a little bit is that David was an honor student who had no history of discipline. So, as the leader, we decided to have the officer go and cuff them both and bring them in. At that point, it was discovered that David had brass knuckles that he was holding for James, and with our previous knowledge of James, had a positive relationship and know what he has done in the past. He had threatened David and coerced him to take the brass knuckles. So, by definition, it's a 45-day sentence in a juvenile center as well as automatic expulsion. So, that is obviously a huge key for a student who has been honors, no issues before. When the parents came in, they were shocked to hear that anything had happened. So somehow the rule still does apply to David because he was holding on to them even though it was under the threat. So part of being ethical is admitting when you make a mistake. So it was a situation that I believe could have been intervened without the police presence in order to see what was going on before the police did get involved. I definitely would not expel David under giving all of these circumstances, even with the threat of some possible consequences to my job. Accountability starts at the top. That would be with me. I would have to say that I made the mistake doing that, even though the rule does say, the letter of the law does say that David should be expelled. Under the situation, I believe that you cannot expel him because he was forced to take those brass knuckles and just didn't have the skills to be able to refuse those at that time. He has a bright future in front of him. This would go on his record, depending on, say, if he's from a certain school or a certain area, that can be backbreaking. So they see that he's from this lower income community, that he has this history of having brass knuckles. Without any more context than that, he can be written off automatically. So whatever punishment that my superior decides to administer would have to be accepted under those circumstances. I would go ahead and try to get in front of that as far as talking with them, see what kind of alternative punishments we can do, and see exactly what my punishment would be. David would be harmed the most by the results of this, and that's what I would focus on rather than what would happen to me necessarily. So I can empathize with how difficult the decision would be. There's a chance that it could be a demotion for me or further issues for the power dynamic within the school if whoever was stepped up underneath me was not ready for the role, or if there was just other factors at play. So if I was forced to step down and then that fact caused other problems to happen at the school, it could be understood that that would be more of a negative to the school as a whole rather than just for one student taking an unfortunate situation. So that would what would be have to be considered in a cost benefit analysis. So all parties must be considered, as I said before, the students, the parents, the parties involved, the school stakeholders, the media coverage of the school, and what would happen due to that. And the decision would have to demonstrate my capacity to evaluate the ethical dimensions of the issues. You have to be able to show that you can come at it from all different angles and that you are approaching it ethically, not selfishly, and not overly favoring one student or the other. So the first option would be to let the district follow through the letter of the law and allow David to be expelled. The consequences of that action would just be devastating to David potentially. The second option would be to not expel David and tell the boss that you have the autonomy to make the decision on this, and the days will probably be numbered, meaning you'll probably be gone. And third option is that I would lay out a probationary circumstance with zero tolerance, where if anything happens with David whatsoever, then that expulsion is followed through upon. But to just give him another chance to keep that off of his record, give him the chance for the bright future that it looks like he has, and see if there's any possible way that we can get around that without him being expelled. So you have to take a look at what the overall consequences will be. How do you get the smallest negative impact? How can you help the young men to behave better? And how can you show that the understanding and capacity to undertake and implement the ethical decision making within the school setting is proficient? Those would be some keys there. So the decision must show that I am modeling ethical behavior and personal conduct and relationships in mind, as well as cultivating the ethical behavior in others. So you must have well-defined guidelines and boundaries in order to make sure that others are acting ethically. It has to be known what is expected. It can't be a surprise when somebody crosses that line and then they are reprimanded for it. They need to know that these are the boundaries. If you go outside of these boundaries, this is what will happen. So it can be controlled in a limited amount, because I believe that if somebody is doing something out of fear, it is not truly what they want to do. They're just afraid of getting punished, but it should be encouraged that they are going to be empowered to do that. They are empowered to act ethically, that they will be rewarded for acting ethically. And it must be something that is led by example as the leader. So when you recognize ethics have been breached, appropriate actions, the initial relationship is key to me. If you have no relationship with the student or whoever it is, say the student or the teacher, and then you are reprimanding them for the said action, there will be some sort of negative feelings no matter what. It's important to have that initial relationship so they know what you are about in general and they know what you expect, and then the offending party must feel their situation is heard. Even if that does result in the same consequences, they have to know that you hear and kind of understand why what happened, and that you're not judging them as a person, you're just judging the action. So there would need to be an action plan in place to make sure that it doesn't happen again in the future if they are still around, say not expelled or not fired. And there need to be clear expectations of what will happen if it does happen again as a repeat offense. So, holding yourself and others accountable for ethical behavior, you have to have those core principles for yourself. You have to know what you stand for and where the gray area is. We all know there is a gray area with ethics, but you have to know what your core principles are and what you will not stand for. For example, in my classroom, I do not let students disrespect each other, period. That is something that I come down hard on, and we can have fun up until that point. So, following off the previous slide, expectations have to be known, so key, and it's helpful that the code of the teacher conduct is agreed upon by the staff as well. So, what you expect from your teachers, they have some input on what that is, and for what you expect from your students, they should have some input on what should be expected from each other. So, addressing unethical behavior as it may adversely affect students and adults. Different responses that I feel are appropriate for students and adults when unethical behavior is taking place. So I think that you do have to address students different than you address adults. If you address adults as students, generally you will lose respect. The interaction will not go as well. But I believe that being direct and to the point of what the issue is key. So it's important the other party knows that you are coming from a place of love and care, that it's coming from either the teacher offended you with how they treated their students or with how they treated other staff members, and same with students, that you feel that you have a care for how they treated the staff members or students, and as far as disrespecting them. So you have to, when speaking with adults about the conduct towards students, you have to make sure to have the student as the center of the conversation rather than really what is going on or what the action was. It's all about people. It's all about how the action affected people. That has to be what the center of the conversation is. So, ethical decision making, ethics should be at the center of all the policies. Policies based off of control rather than ethics, they ring pretty hollow. For example, we have a school policy that limits do-rags within our school, and there's a function for the kids to have them. It's just what I would consider a racist policy, and it affects one race specifically, and the kids have a really hard time buying into